hear me if I speak at that level? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. So exactly 1 year ago today, by some major coincidence, I graduated from my master's in international peace studies back in Dublin. To no one's surprise, friends, family. Oh, thank you. I always forget a master's is a big deal, but yeah, thank you. To absolutely no one's surprise, I did my thesis on Erasmus and ESN. So my name is Cliona Nifather. I am the main arbitrator of ESN International, but today I'm going to talk about something that's outside of volunteering, very close to my heart, which is peace and identity, and my thesis about how ESNers can become peace builders. I do want to give just a small little content warning to start. I will be talking about kind of conflict and war and peace building. So if this is something that affects you personally, feel free to take a step out at any time if you need, or you can come talk to me afterwards. But sometimes the topic is quite heavy. So the only real question I get when I tell people I studied peace is, well, I get two questions. First of all, they say, are you a hippie? Because I say, I studied peace. And then the other one is, what the hell does that mean? Because a lot of people I talk to think the world is at peace. They think, why do you need to study peace? We have peace. Now, they're not wrong about me being a little bit of a hippie and loving peace, but they are wrong about the world being at peace. So over a year ago, January 2023, the UN Security Council announced that we are seeing the highest volume of armed conflict in the world or in Europe since World War II. And currently, the Council on Foreign Relations is tracking 27 major conflicts across the world. So I think it's a really good question, what is peace? But it's not easy to define. I will try to give you a little small overview, but really I could stand here all day and really talk to you about what it is. So I want you to just know two things, first of all, about peace. The first is peace is a process. I think a lot of people think it's a product, it's something you reach, but it's a very long process that can take decades at a time. The second thing is I want you to know that conflict is more than just physical violence, and peace means more than just the absence of violence. So as you might be able to tell by my very long name that none of us can spell, or just the accent, I'm from Ireland. So thank you. Over 25 years ago, last year, Ireland signed a peace agreement. It's one of the strongest peace agreements in the world, and it brought an end to 30 years of war in Northern Ireland. And growing up, my parents always said, you're so lucky to live in a peaceful country. And I didn't really understand it when I was small, but now I realize they said that to me because they didn't grow up in a fully peaceful country. And I am so lucky to live in a peaceful country, but I think we also do need to be aware that just because they signed the peace agreement didn't mean that that was the end, that was, we had reached peace. There is still so much work being done by the government, by communities, by NGOs to maintain that peace. So when we say peace is a process, it starts way before the peace agreement and it continues way after the peace agreement. And I think peace is not a product, is a very kind of strong message. I want people to think of peace as something you're always working for, not something you want to have and then forget about, but it's something you're constantly thinking about. Then in terms of violence and peace and war and peace, generally violence doesn't break out just for no reason. There's almost always an underlying conflict. It's not maybe physical conflict, but there's inequality, there's injustice, there's something happening behind the scenes. And then that also means that peace doesn't just start when the fighting stops. So, for example, if you're experiencing systemic injustice, discrimination against your religion, your culture, your beliefs, who you are as a person, and if that sparks a conflict, when that conflict ends, you don't want it to go back to the way things were. You need that injustice to be gone for there to be true peace. This idea was actually also mentioned in the opening panel. I got really excited. It's called positive peace. So when you work towards a structural transformation where you change the whole system and kind of foster justice and self-sustained peace and create a world where not only there is no fighting, but there's not a possibility for the fighting to start again. This process is called peace building. This is something I'm maybe a bit annoying about. I love the word peace building. There's also, you might have heard peacekeeping, peacemaking, but I think they aren't as strong as building. So like really creating something strong, rooted in the ground and building it up. And one philosopher kind of calls peace building a dynamic social construct. So really this idea that it's not just something we're trying to grab, it's something we're trying to live within. So that's a little bit of Peace 101 for all of you, but I'm going to move on to what my thesis was about. So you might think, how did you turn ESN into this? But in 1950, the Schuman Declaration was signed, so another little history lesson now. And it was the idea that we could start uniting Europe so we'd never see a war like World War II again. And Schuman said, Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create de facto solidarity. And when thinking about my research, I really wanted to look at one of these achievements, which is the Erasmus Plus program, which has worked towards creating this solidarity. So the general objective of the program, I think a lot of us know, is to support educational, professional, personal development of people in education, training, youth and sport in Europe and beyond, and to strengthen European identity and active citizenship. The aim of my research was to examine through ESN, through interviewing ESNers like yourselves, if the Erasmus Plus program is successful in creating this idea of European identity and kind of what is European identity, how does it help us to make peace? So I gathered a group of ESNers. I was at an event like this, running around saying, you, I want to talk to you. I had a good mix. Some people were EU nationals. I had a few French people, Turkish people, Swiss, a few British, to really get a good idea of what do all of these different identities think about European identity. So my first question to all my participants was, do you feel European? And I did not really expect all the different answers. It was a really complicated question for some people, and for other people, all I typed was yes, full stop. So the next question then was, what are the characteristics of being European or Europeanness? And I was also quite surprised people gave a very balanced view. There was more negative than I expected, and a lot of positive I'd never thought about. So the positive, of course, was open-mindedness, tolerance, a sense of belonging, acceptance, peace, freedom, liberalism, easy travel, free movement, education, kind of everything we're always talking about. And one interviewee said, it's feeling part of a bigger region and feeling like you share a culture and identity with the countries around you. And I think at EGM, we really feel this. There's something kind of in the air. But I did get like a few negative traits, and I was surprised this came from almost everyone. So people identified as European or non-European. And a lot of them talked about kind of Eurocentrism and the privilege that they have and that their friends don't have, or the privilege that they wish they had. And a lot of them also talked about this concept of European values. So a few people said that these are values that are shared around the world, so why do we call them European? And one participant, I think about this quote a lot, said, I feel a bit anxious when people frame it as just European, because why do they think that? I don't believe they're European values. They should be humanitarian or human values. It should be fostered as world values or peace values. And I hadn't really thought of that before, but I thought it was very kind of interesting to kind of be met with that. Then, despite the mix of kind of positive, negative ideas of Europeanness, about 90% of my participants all said when they went on Erasmus, they came back to their country and felt more European. I also found this really interesting because not everyone had felt European to start with, but Erasmus had given them this sense of identity, a European identity, so to speak. So it is undeniable that the Erasmus Plus program kind of creates this idea of European identity, and that Erasmus contributes to peace because of meeting other cultures, different backgrounds, having all these conversations. But there seemed to be something bigger. I couldn't wrap my head around it because at the same time, everyone was talking about how wonderful like it is to have this European identity, but I didn't understand how it wasn't just within Europe, it was everyone I talked to, like people from all over. And like non-European students kind of, they felt connected to Europeanness, but then wouldn't be geographically European and politically European. So I kind of had a look at where do we draw the borders of Europe? And it's another very big question. So is it geographical Europe? Is it political Europe, social, cultural? There's a lot of different elements to it. And if you look at this idea of like collective social identity and the theory behind it, a lot of theorists say you need borders to create an identity. So for example, I say I'm from North Dublin because there's a river going through Dublin and it separates it. If there was no river, I wouldn't say I'm from North Dublin, it wouldn't make sense, so I would just say I'm from Dublin. And a sociologist, Klaus Eder, wrote, collective identities are spaces of communication to which boundaries are essential. But when we think about Europe, the boundaries get a bit fuzzy. Is it geographical? Is it the EU? Like, do we identify as European because we're EU citizens? But then I interviewed Turkish and Armenian students who said they were European, and Swiss students, even though they're on the continent of Europe, didn't feel European. So I've actually been very nervous to give this talk, and I've been rewriting it even 30 minutes before because of what I found. But I think for us we have to challenge the status quo, discover new ideas, really challenge ourselves. And this research really challenged me as well. And I had a few moments when I was writing it and called my supervisor, I was like, I don't know how to finish all of this. But through my research, I do not think there is, as we know it, a collective European identity. I don't think that we know what that is. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, because I myself went in Erasmus and I came back and said, I feel European, and I'd never felt that before. But I think as Erasmus alumni or as volunteers, if you haven't done Erasmus, I think there's a different identity, a unique ESN or Erasmus generation identity. So this was something going into my research I didn't think I'd find. I was trying to look at, does European identity help peace? I didn't think I'd say, is there European identity? So taking this idea of kind of an Erasmus generation identity, an ESNer identity, when we say like identities given to us because of our opportunities with Erasmus or because we're European, we do exclude a lot of people. Like there are 27 EU member states, but we have well over 40 countries, over 70 nationalities are here at EGM. So not everyone is kind of European who is at EGM, but we all do have this, this identity, something that's drawing us together. You feel it this morning with all the cheering in the sessions, you feel it at the flag parade. So that's where I kind of thought there must be something else, like a wider, more diverse identity that's really bringing us all together, still with that idea of Europeanness and Erasmus and ESN, but it's just not connected to geography or politics. It's more connected to our social experience. So why does this matter? Why am I telling you you feel like ESNers? Because you already know you do. I think it's really important to know the bounds of your identity. I think it gives you real potential as a peace builder to know where your passion comes from, where you come from, and kind of what you want to share, how you want to build peace. And I think identifying as part of a mobilized youth is so much stronger and it's so much more inclusive than just identifying as European. So I myself identify as Irish, European, but ESNer and Erasmus generation. So how can we use it? Where is the power in this identity? I think the power, it's at events like this, it's talking to different people, talking about your culture, trying to see things from different points of view, going to sessions where ideas are challenged. And I really want to bring you back to the earlier example of Ireland. I think everyone knows I'm a very proud Irish person. I'm always bringing it up whenever I can. But 30 years of war in Ireland ended not because they signed a piece of paper. It ended because the communities that had conflict and had differences decided that's enough, we can't do this anymore. And they still have those differences, they still have their own identities and conflicting ideas, but they wanted to end the conflict. And that's what peace building is. It's saying, within our communities, within our connections to each other, we need to find common ground and we need to build something. It's not that we're going to put walls up, we're going to separate ourselves. It's we need to come together and create something together. So I think as ESNers and with this ESN identity, I can't expect anyone to go out and start writing peace agreements, but I can, I think, send you out to think about peace. We did a really interesting, my first day of my master's and thought experiment, where they said go out throughout your day and see how many references in your life there is to conflict and how many to peace. And that really makes you kind of realize that there's a lot of references to conflict in the world, like children playing with toy guns, and there's not as many references to peace. But by creating like events on local level about educating about different cultures, maybe organizing marches or petitions on your national level, and then coming to these events and finding people who are different, deciding I want to go outside my comfort zone, I want to find people who are really different to me and talk to them. These all seem like small, simple things, but with purpose and collective, as the Erasmus generation, it really paves the way for peace and prevents future conflicts. So I want you to remember, peace is a commitment and a process, and it's step by step to create a sense of a culture of justice and that de facto solidarity that Schuman talked about in 1950. And yeah, as a group of young mobilized youth, spreading identity beyond Europe has so much power, because if we go beyond just European identity to Erasmus generation, we can include everyone. And that's really, really so powerful. So to conclude, my research found it's very difficult to figure out what is European identity, but we know that there's something else. We know there's a collective identity as young volunteers, and we can use that really to contribute to peace, to have a more diverse identity that really, paves the way to create something. So thank you for listening. I may take questions if you want. I don't know if I